Hello from the other side of pregnancy. 10 weeks postpartum here. We're starting a new series. This will be my postpartum series, part 1. And I believe that postpartum actually starts with birth. So that's where we're going to begin. And I actually decided that I will break this video up into 2 parts. So I'm actually going to talk about my home birth experience. In this first part, I'm going to focus on why I chose home birth and why it was right to me, and just some common misconceptions about it and why it actually is very safe. And then in my second video, I'm going to talk about my birth story. So to begin, hello, it's been a while since I've shared truly and deeply what's on my heart. And as you know, these videos have a tendency to be a little bit long. I am going to work on making them shorter as we go, but for the sake of these next 2 videos, I'm just going to let it be what it's going to be because it's important to me, and I think this is information that people need. So yes, I chose a home birth, and I wasn't very vocal about it in pregnancy because it was very sacred to me. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of even people that I told in my close circle of friends gave me their opinions on it and how they thought it was unsafe. And so I didn't really want that out in the world. But now that I'm through and I had a wonderful experience, and yes, home birth does not always go as planned. People who plan for home birth, perfect, healthy, normal, it can go a lot of different ways. So I just wanted to come on and talk about it. So I chose home birth, and just so that everybody knows, so to be able to have a home birth in the state of California specifically, I will speak to California because that's my only experience as of this moment, but you have to be considered healthy, normal. Typically, that means no underlying conditions, depending on your midwife. And yeah, some midwives will allow for a little bit of wiggle room depending on what the underlying condition is. So for me, yes, I was very sick in pregnancy, but it was nausea, vomiting, which is normal. Some will say not normal, but common, right? Mine, nausea, vomiting went on beyond the first trimester. But that aside, I was healthy. My baby was healthy. He was growing. He was totally good the whole time. So that's why I was a good candidate for home birth. And just so that everybody knows, when you choose midwifery, so midwives are able to facilitate home births in our state, and there are also midwives in hospitals too, and that is also an option. Some people may choose to give birth in a hospital or a birth center. There are also birth centers within hospitals that have nurse midwives. So nurse midwives are RNs that have an additional year or so of midwifery training. Now, licensed midwives practice outside of hospitals in their own private practice. I chose what is called the Acorn Birth Center here in Fallbrook, California, which is very close to where I live in East Oceanside. And they're really the only freestanding birth center left in San Diego. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure they're the only one left that also takes insurance. So I think a big topic that people have, or a barrier to home birth, is they often think it's very expensive or they can't afford the care. So actually, Acorn is one of the few that takes insurance. I was able to have it covered under my insurance and part of my home birth. So actually, all of my care leading up to birth, all of my prenatal care is the word. Sorry, postpartum brain is still a little bit rusty. All of that was covered. So also, in the midwifery model of care, you still get the same type of checkups that you get with an OBGYN. So I had regular visits with my midwife, the same as you do, and what is, be considered traditional Western care. I had a 20-week anatomy scan. I had gestational diabetes testing. My baby was being monitored. I had an 8-week ultrasound. I had the 20-week anatomy scan. I had genetic testing. I knew I was having a boy before. So I had all of the same things that all of my friends who chose to give birth in a hospital had. And the only difference was is that I chose to give birth at home. And I will say, to give birth at home, it does require, it's a different mindset, I would say, than giving birth in a hospital. And anybody who's given birth will know that no matter what you choose, whether it's at home, in a hospital, in a birth center, if it happens in your car on the way to the hospital, which sometimes happens to people, you don't escape the experience. Whether you, even if you choose C-section, planned C-section, or even if it goes emergency C-section, or vaginal delivery with an epidural, most women will still experience the discomfort of giving birth. It's all a choice. And I think for me, just knowing I had a choice in it was important to me. And that's what I want to empower all women to have. And I know that this video might be triggering, and my birth story might be for anybody that maybe wanted a home birth or was planning for home birth and that it didn't work out. And I want to let you know that it is okay, that the birth experience that you have is what you're meant to have, and it's the way your baby chose to be born, because they choose. Ultimately, your baby chooses what they want. And as moms, dads, parents, whatever, we can plan as much as we want, but our babies are going to come in the way that they desire. So there is a lot of surrender in it, I would say, and having a home birth in particular and preparing for it. And I wanted to share some resources that help me decide on home birth. So one of the, well, not first books I read on birth, but one of my guiding books is Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. So Ina May was one of the leading midwives in the U.S. She started back in the late 60s, early 70s, and she had a group of women who were all having babies on this kind of journey they were making from west to east, and they landed in Tennessee, and she created what is called the farm in Tennessee. And she shares how she got her training. Her and her midwives trained with a doctor, an OBGYN, that helped them. They had a very high success rate at the farm with home birth at their farm, but they were very well trained by doctors and in the field. They shared about when things would go wrong, they would have to go to the hospital, when there needed to be a C-section. It's a wonderful book, and I highly recommend, if you're considering a home birth, to get this book. And there's the first whole half of the book is birth stories, and most of them are positive birth stories about home birth being can be calm. It can be the very specific low lighting. You can eat in labor. You can walk around, things like that. People who had really good experiences at the farm. She also does share about situations where they needed to go to the hospital, where it was necessary to have an emergency C-section, or it was needed to have an epidural for XYZ reason. So she shares those birth experiences. But the second half of the book actually is all about physiological childbirth and what happens in birth if not everybody knows. So if you are a childbirth, you are in the women's health field perhaps, or you are pregnant yourself, or you're planning to conceive and want to consider home birth, I highly recommend this book. And to start with the second half of the book that she talks about physiological birth. It was really helpful to me and gave me a lot of clarity on why I wanted to choose it for myself. Another book that I read that I don't have with me here is a book called Birthing from Within, which was also next to this, to Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Birthing from Within was probably one of the best childbirth education books that I've read, because it talks about exercises to do to prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but also if you're weighing different options, whether to give birth in a hospital, whether you want to give birth at home or a birth center. She actually lists out the pros and cons in the book, and why, if you're a candidate for home birth, if you want to know. So that's a really great place to start Birthing from Within. is another book, and I can share in the caption the name of the book. And then Feng Shui Mommy is another book I really liked that helped me prepare, particularly for birth in general and motherhood, and just kind of creating the space that I wanted for my birth. I will say preparing for a home birth is a lot more work than preparing to go to the hospital, because you may want your home a certain way. For me, leading up, we had at 36 weeks, we had a walkthrough with our midwives and our doula, my husband, and um, they brought in a birth tub for us that was like an inflatable tub that we had to have practice with, make sure it was good to go. Luckily, we did blow our birth tub up in advance because we discovered it had a hole, so we had to get another one. We needed a special hose, which they gave us a hose, but then we figured out that we needed a special adapter because it had to connect to our shower. So there was a lot of just logistical things that we had to consider. I also am somebody that cares a lot about my space and the way that it feels. So I bought electronic candles. I did have some regular scented candles, but as you all may remember, I was very smell sensitive in pregnancy, so I was very cautious on the candles, on scented candles, for that reason. We had done a lot of meal prep. We had stuff in our freezer for postpartum specifically, but we also had labor snacks ready to go, because when you have a home birth or birth center birth, you're allowed to eat. And that's one big, I think, debatable. I think when you give birth in a hospital, a lot of times they don't let you eat because there's always the possibility that there could be an emergency C-section, meaning surgery, and they don't want you to have a full stomach. So with a home birth, you are allowed to eat in labor, and we had our snacks. I actually had some Trader Joe's cookies and snacks labeled for birth that we saved and had them ready to go. And when we went into labor, pulled them out. So there was just a lot more preparation of my physical space. I also was concerned about my smell sensitivity. And so much so, and because I was so sick in pregnancy, I did consider having a hospital birth. And right around maybe 26 weeks ago, I had a long conversation with my midwife. And she said, look, you're a great candidate for home birth. You have no risk factors. Your baby is healthy and growing as he should. You can do it. And if you feel like you want to give birth in a hospital, that is an option. Because here's the thing. Most women do labor at home, even if they are planning for a hospital birth. And it's essentially the same thing. In home birth, you spend just time, you're laboring at home. The only difference is where you push your baby out for the most part. And I know a lot of people who go to the hospital, they say it's too early, they send them home, and sometimes they end up giving birth in their bathtub or in the car on the way back to the hospital because they were sent home, and it's hard to know. So it's actually super nice to have everything at home, and knowing, I think for me mentally, that everything was right here. Um, and I had even talked with some other friends who were pregnant or had had babies right before me. They're like, ultimately, you're just laboring at home. And if you choose to go to the hospital because the pain becomes really overwhelming, you still have that option. So I think for me, I was really at peace knowing if at any point I couldn't handle it, I could go to the hospital. And that was a great option for me. And luckily, I didn't have to do it. So I'll share more about that when I share my specific birth story. I think another part that people talk a lot about is, the lack of safety in it. Now, like I said, I had all of my prenatal care with my midwife, all of the same care that you would get with an OBGYN or in a hospital, and all of the things that they bring to your birth. Licensed midwives are highly trained practitioners. They know what they're doing. They've delivered hundreds or thousands of babies, and they also know they're listening to your fetal heart tones the whole time. I even had an NST leading up to going into labor. They know all of the red flags, and if you do need to go to the hospital for whatever reason, you can go. And they are able to have a certain amount of medication like Pitocin in the case that there is hemorrhaging, which is one of the biggest concerns with post birth is hemorrhaging. They have Pitocin, which helps to clot the blood and stop bleeding if it does happen, and several other, they're trained in other emergency procedures if that does happen, or if something happens with your baby, to be able to help them breathe, suction, or resuscitate if needed. And they know the red flags of when you need to go to the hospital, because they're also monitoring your blood pressure. They are listening to your baby. They're taking your temperature. Believe me, it is a very elaborate process. As leading up to birth, in addition to our walkthrough, we were getting visits at our birth center, but they were also coming to our house sometimes as well to check on us, to do my visits at home, checking my blood pressure, all of that. So I would say I felt so safe. I felt really well cared for. I felt really loved leading up to going into labor, and that continued into my birth as well. So another side to it, I know, is the cost prohibiting factor that some people say with home birth, which can be. Most midwives are private, and it is an out-of-pocket cost, which is about anywhere between $6,000 and $8,000, which it's a lot. However, it is also not free to go through insurance and give birth in a hospital. And I know with hospital births, and I hear this from many women afterwards, is that they bill you for all the little things. And a lot of times insurance doesn't cover all of your hospital birth either. And sometimes you end up paying another $5,000 to $10,000 or more with just a hospital birth alone. So those are just some of the things I wanted to address. That was why I chose home birth for myself, and other reasons that for me, birth felt safe for me at home. And ultimately, I think everyone should have the ability to choose where they feel the most safe. And that's when I'm supporting other women when they're deciding where to give birth. That's my ultimate question, is where do you feel the most safe? So that's the question to ask. And if the answer is home, then you can try for home birth. If you feel the most safe in a hospital, then you go to the hospital. If you would feel the most safe in a birth center, then you go to a birth center. And those are all options. I think the biggest thing that we want in birth is choice. And I think that's another reason why I didn't choose a hospital birth, is because a lot of times in hospitals, choice does get taken away, unfortunately. There's a lot of push for additional interventions that aren't necessary, like Pitocin, or a push for an induction at 38 weeks. Or there's really bright lights. There's a lot of people in the room that you might not want, whereas in a home birth, you have the ability to choose who's there. So for me, I chose my partner. I chose my doula. I got to choose my midwife, and then the second midwife that came. So that's another thing in home birth. You have two. One that's responsible for you and your health and helping you birth your baby. And then the second midwife is in charge of kind of logistical things, charting, and the baby and monitoring them. And then once baby is out, it's, they're tag teaming and taking care of you, the mother, and your child. So that's just a little summary on home birth, why I chose it, and why I felt safe. In part 2, I want to share about my home birth experience. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening. I can't wait to share more with you.